Okay, now we have to shift gears, Shannon.
Yeah, some serious stuff.
I know. Well, now that footage of Ray Rice knocking out his wife during an elevator brawl has emerged, and he's been suspended indefinitely from the NFL, what will this mean for his career and the future of the league?
Here to break it all down is sports analyst Keith Reed and former prosecutor and associated managing director of the risk mitigation firm Reed Dan Schorr. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show.
Thank you.
Now, the NFL finally made this decision to indefinitely suspend him, but why did it take so long?
Well, the NFL, first of all, they came out and admitted that they made a mistake.
Okay.
When this first happened, they suspended Ray Rice for 2 games. Then they came back and said, oops, we made a mistake. That should have been longer. They did not have the information. They said they didn't have the information that they currently had today. And then they revised their policy on abuse in the league. And now they came back and finally, when the tape was released, went back and said, oh, no, Ray Rice, you got to be gone.
Now, Dan, do you really believe they didn't have access to this footage at all? It just doesn't seem to make sense. Apparently, according to TMZ, Ray Rice's attorneys had the footage, the local police had the footage, but this multi-billion-dollar industry couldn't get their hand on the footage? I don't know.
It's hard to believe that they did have the footage and they still used a 2-game suspension. So for that reason, I might credit them, even though they didn't act aggressively enough. But even more disturbing than the football part of it is the fact that the criminal prosecution did not lead to any jail time. And you know law enforcement had the security tape.
Right.
So they saw him punch his then fiancée, knock her out, and he didn't get any jail time. And that's even more shocking than the fact that he got a small suspension in football.
Now, is that because his then fiancée did not press charges, or could they have still given him?
They could definitely build a case. I was a domestic violence prosecutor, and although it's tougher when the victim doesn't cooperate, the defendant's still a public safety threat. And here you have what you often don't have, which is videotape evidence. How often in a fight, a domestic fight, do you have a videotape showing what happened?
Right.
So the prosecution has an extremely strong case. When I was a prosecutor, I would have loved to have had a case this strong, someone on tape, unprovoked, knocking someone out and then dragging their body out, not showing any remorse from what we can see.
Right. Now, why do you think he was suspended indefinitely as opposed to being banned for life? I mean, this does technically give him an opportunity to enter back into the league, right?
Right. Well, there are some technicalities that exist in the league's collective bargaining agreement where you can't just outright ban somebody.
Okay.
So there has to be a procedure that they go through. But at this stage of the game, it's very difficult to see a scenario in which any team, even if the commissioner came back a year or 2 from now and say, Ray Rice, we welcome you back into the NFL fold. You've got to give a pound of flesh. You've got to have a punishment. You've got to do some other things. I can't see another team touching him. Maybe somewhere down the line. I mean, people said that about Michael Vick a few years ago, but that is entirely different from what we have, again, videotaped evidence of Ray Rice doing to his then fiancée, now wife.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Michael Vick because Michael Vick had to serve jail time for his involvement in shooting dogs, tragically. And it seems like Rice has gotten a slap on the wrist. Dan, explain that to us, because there are a lot of people out there who are confused about why one was treated so severely and another
you see Michael Vick go to prison. You see Plaxico Burress go to prison.
Right, for shooting himself.
Now, it's hard to compare case to case. They're different jurisdictions, different crimes. But the fact that Ray Rice is on videotape knocking out his fiancée without any provocation, and there's no jail time at all, that is just shocking, and I think it speaks to the larger problem with the way prosecutors and police are not always aggressive with domestic violence cases. Even though there's more awareness, are they really taking the steps needed to punish aggressors and deter other people from being abusive?
Well, this will definitely hurt and has hurt his brand, but how has it affected the league? They clearly fumbled the ball on this one.
Well, absolutely. The league is taking a lot of PR hits right now. I mean, one of the biggest problems that the league has is that it appears that they were cynical in handing down the punishment that they did for Ray Rice this week because they didn't do anything originally, only the 2-game suspension. Right. And there's really no difference because the league told us that they already talked to Ray Rice, that they already knew exactly what happened on the elevator. So the only difference is that the public can now see the videotape. So it makes the league look extremely cynical in doing this, and it makes it look like a PR move. The league is definitely damaged by this. And there are people who are calling for the resignation of Roger Goodell. I don't think that'll happen.
I was going to say, do you think that's likely to happen? Dan, what do you think?
I don't think so.
Keith, what do you think?
I don't think so. And the NFL acknowledged they handled this wrong, but this week they handled it right. They suspended him indefinitely, and that's a good sign. Now, they're going to review what they did in the past. They've revised their policies, and Roger Goodell says, we messed up with the initial suspension. So let's see going forward what they do.
Well, what do you think this suspension does for others who may be in domestic violence cases? What kind of message does it send to other players?
Well, it sends a strong message, right? I mean, you've got 2 infractions. The first infraction is 6 games, so that's automatically almost half a season right there.
Right.
The second infraction, you're gone. You get the indefinite ban from the league. So, I mean, it puts you on notice. But the question is, what is the NFL really going to do beyond that? Because you can ban somebody, you can suspend somebody, but that doesn't mean that they're getting the counseling that they need. That doesn't mean that the girlfriend or the wife or the fiance is getting the help that they need. So hopefully the NFL is going to put some more resources behind what they do, not just suspending somebody and sending them home to continue on in an abusive situation.
Dan, I want to talk about the money, but Keith, I want to talk about the fact that the NFL, you worked at ESPN, so you know the insides of the NFL more than we do. Do you think this was poorly handled because of the fact that there are not a lot of women in positions of power at the NFL?
It's possible.
Maybe if there were more women in the boardroom, they would have helped direct Mr. Goodell and the rest of the men in the room to handle this in a different way?
And you know this. I'm a big advocate of diversity across the board, not just in sports, but across the board. When you have people who represent various viewpoints and various interests at the table in a decision-making capacity, not subordinates, but in a decision-making capacity, you get people there who can say, hey, wait a minute. And I cannot believe that if there were someone in the room when that decision was being handed down who was a woman who could understand, domestic violence from that perspective, that, the old boys network would have said 2 games and that's it.
But Dan, real quick, I have to ask you, the Ravens have already paid him $25 million, mainly in bonuses. Do they stand a chance in getting any of that money back?
It depends on the language of the contract and the collective bargaining agreement, and I'm not privy to that information, but you would expect them to go after what they can, considering they really invested in him being with the team for a while, and they're not getting what they thought. Plus, the bad public relations is going to hurt the entity of the Ravens, so they'll probably go after what they can, but I don't know if they'll be successful.
All right, well, gentlemen, come back under better circumstances, you promise? Okay.
Absolutely.
Good to have you here. Thank you so much. And you're watching Arise Entertainment 360.